I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Mossy Oak Gamekeeper Podcast. Welcome to West Point, Mississippi. It's 110 degrees in the shade, Toxie.
Oh, yeah, that was last night, actually.
Yeah, and boy, our guests, it's probably even hotter down there. But
I mean, maybe not. They get a little bit of breeze we don't get sometimes, so
could be.
Who knows?
Let me get them introduced, and we can ask them. And so, look, we've got Mr. George Warthen. He's the Chief Conservation Officer for the Florida Wildlife Commission, if I've got that right. And then we've got Mr. Morgan Richardson, who's the Director of Hunting and Game Management. These guys have some cool titles now.
That's what Bobby said this morning on the email or text or whatever. What a cool title.
Welcome, guys. We're glad to have y'all.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And the Chief Conservation Officer title's a little odd for state agencies, but you can just consider it the Chief Conversation Officer for today, since that's what we're doing. That's a lot of what I end up doing. So we're really glad to be here. Appreciate y'all having us.
I bet it's the Chief Conservation Conversations I don't really want to have officer sometimes too.
There's a lot of unique topics. I tell you what, I mean, we're always learning something, always talking about something new. There's a lot of things going on in Florida, so there's always a lot to talk about.
I remind people all the time when that word comes up, it's like real easy to go to the core of the definition. Is you move out the con and the shun, and in the middle it says serve, and we're serving the critters. It's pretty easy. Yeah, you know, and the earth we live on, yes, too, for sure. But serve is a great word to be stuck in the middle of that.
Absolutely. Well, let me set the table. So Tox is at the other end. We've got Mac joining us, who's has pinch hitting, so to speak, for Lanny, who's on vacation in Florida somewhere, as a matter of fact. Which you guys probably need to alert some wardens out there when we get out. We'll give you.
If tell them send a alert to them if y'all catch him. Just keep him down there. Yeah, do us all a favor before deer season gets here.
And then we've got Dudley here, Dudley Phelps. So
I'm just here by default.
Richie is running the board, and goodness gracious, we've got a first. Toxie, when I look at the screen, George is the first person to ever wear a tie on our podcast.
Could be. I thought that was against the rules.
You know what? I was going to warn him, but I thought he might have gone to a funeral today.
Funny story. I grew up in, we talked about it before, the kind of legendary hunting club my dad was in. But as one of their rules, they had some kind of cool old crazy rules back then. But occasionally somebody would come in, a guest they had come in, like maybe a lawyer or some business guy or something would come in with a tie on, and that was the rule. You don't say anything to them. Somebody would grab them, and the other one would cut the tie in half. And they had a little deal on the wall. It could have been a couple dozen ties, like half the tie, they pinned it to the wall. So it was against their rules at hunting camp to ever come in there with a tie on. I don't think we're going to worry him about it, though.
So, y'all, I thought about changing, but I walked in last minute to join y'all here today. And I miss working out in the woods, but, of course, I work here in town now. And even though our legislative session is over, sharing what we do in conservation and trying to make sure that we have all the resources to do good conservation in Florida never ends. So I spent the earlier part of the day at the Capitol, and then now get to spend the rest of the day with y'all.
Well, let's just call this, I'll speak on behalf of everything Mossy Oak. Let's call this also a celebration of your state and its natural resources, because it is absolutely a diamond gem in the US of A. And, you know, I know it's a constant struggle. There's so many issues, things that aren't going right. You got to get right and so forth. But it is a gem, and we've been able to enjoy it some over the years. So thank you. It's kind of like I said, it's like military people. Thank you for your service, but we mean it.
Well, thank you. We're blessed to live here, and you said it earlier with serve. We're blessed to get to serve the state of Florida and the resources we love. So appreciate that.
You know, it's come up more than once. We have said that Florida probably has, these guys right here probably have as tough a job as is in the country, because they have such a diverse array of wildlife and fisheries.
Especially the fisheries part. So how many miles of coastline do you have?
Oh, I should know that number, but basically, if you take our coastline, from Alabama back all the way around to Georgia, if we stretch that out along the East Coast, we'd go all the way to Maine. So
That's
we're
right.
managing the same length of coastline as the rest of the eastern United States.
Yep.
Not to mention, as y'all put, we've got a lot of unique resources, both land and water. And the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is kind of a amalgamation, a grouping of its predecessor agencies from the Game and Freshwater Fish, Marine Patrol, Marine Fisheries. So we brought all that under one roof in 1999 and became one of the largest state conservation agencies, probably one of the largest law enforcement conservation agencies in the world. And it's a heck of a lot of coastline, a lot of woods and water to cover, with a lot of really unique species along the way.
Yeah.
It's so diverse.
It is.
I mean, you don't get up into the mountains part of this country, but from south tip to northwest corner up there, it is so diverse.
Yeah, manatees, just all kinds of crazy stuff.
You
The rest
remind
of us
me of
don't
that.
have.
And then all the convergence of large population areas with the wilds we love are some challenging things, and you got that just everywhere, because it's such a populous state on top of all the natural resources.
Y'all spoke about manatees, and everybody thinks about alligators in Florida, but we have the American crocodile as well.
That is right.
That's right. Sure do.
Well, look, y'all didn't come on here today to talk about manatees, but there's an important issue going on in Florida. And historically, one of my favorite books, The Yearling, a lot of people don't know this. It was set in Florida. And back in the day, back when this book was set, they were bear hunting. They were running them with dogs. There was a lot of that going on. And I think for a long time, bear hunting was a big tradition in Florida. And then we want to get you guys to explain what's going on. It went away, and y'all are trying to get it back. And let's talk about that. So, George, can you tell us, kind of walk us back through the history? Let's start back in the 70s and bring us forward.
Absolutely. And I'll walk us through a little of the history, and then, I've been with the agency for about 15 years, and Morgan's been working for FWC and former GFC a little longer. So I'll set the tone in the story, and then Morgan has some firsthand knowledge of working some of those early years or some of the later years of bear hunting here in the state before we got to where we are now. So, Florida has a long history with black bears. We're within the native range of bears, and at zenith are the most bears that we think we've had in Florida. I think, at any point was around 10 or 11,000 bears, pretty robust population throughout the entire state. We saw that like much of the rest of the country and similar with some other game species. We saw a slow decline of bears throughout the years. And if we think even prior to regulated hunting, prior to the Lacey Act, 1900 in the United States, like many game species, bears were on the decline. Bears were still at huntable numbers in Florida all the way through the 90s. And, as Florida developed, y'all mentioned it is a growing state. It's been growing for many years, over 20 million people and growing. So, as we have more people in Florida, then we saw bears in what we are referred to as subpopulations. So our bear populations became segmented across the state. And so even throughout the 90s, we had some of our subpopulations, particularly in the Panhandle, that had high enough numbers to hunt. But in the 90s, we reached a number where the former Game and Fresh Fish Commission, which is now us, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, reached a point where they decided to stop hunting and work towards rebuilding of black bears in our subpopulations, work on reconnecting those subpopulations. We want to create corridors, have greater genetic diversity in bears in Florida. And so throughout that time, we took a pause in hunting, and we saw bears rebound, not from the end of hunting, because those areas where we continued to hunt were hunted at numbers that weren't causing any kind of decline to the population, but rather it allowed our agency to focus on connectivity, to bring new genetics into areas that were important, to rebuild public trust in black bears and black bear conservation. And so we finally reached where we are about today. And, we'll fast forward all the way to 2015 when the conversation of hunting came back into the picture in Florida. And right about that time, we were finishing up one of our abundance surveys. And we estimated bear populations at that time to be just over 4,000 bears in the state throughout these subpopulations. Some of our subpopulations still have room for growth and range expansion, and others are really quite large at over 1,000 bears in those subpopulations. And so at that time in 2015, the FWC, the commissioners, voted to have a hunt. And in 2015, we had a hunt that was a format that allowed anybody to buy a license. It was a very open hunt format. And it allowed for folks to call in. You call in every day. You have to check in your harvest and see if we'd reached a quota. We set a quota for right around 300 bears. And so that quota was met in 2 days. And that told us a lot of things. One, that bear populations were robust as we predicted here in Florida, and that hunters were actively engaged in hunting, that they did want to participate in a black bear hunt. And so that hunt ended in 2 days, reaching that quota of right around 300 bears. And then in 2016, commissioners came back to vote on this topic again and decided to take a pause, listening to the public. They wanted to take a pause and focus on rebuilding, or actually revisiting, our black bear management plan. And so in 2019, we finished revising our black bear management plan in Florida and republished that. Fast forward to where we are today in December of 2024. We presented a 5-year update on our black bear management plan to our commissioners. And we received direction from the commissioners to bring back potential options for black bear hunting again here in Florida. And so at our previous meeting just now in May 2025, we presented options for regulated black bear hunting. And I'll actually say highly regulated, very regulated black bear hunting here in Florida. Commissioners approved that plan to move forward, and it'll come back before the commission here in August for final rule approval. And so, we're looking at a little bit different hunt format than we have in the past. We listened to the public. We went out broadly and engaged with the public on feedback of what a hunt would look like. And so the hunt that's on the table now for final approval for commissioners here in Florida is what I think a lot of hunters now are more used to in quota permits throughout, especially here in the Southeast, with special opportunity permits, we call them. And so it provides an opportunity for people to submit applications in a random draw. It has a fairly lower number of tags available in the first year as we start to get back into the swing of bear hunting in Florida, and places a lot of stipulations on how hunters check in bears and communicate with the agency, what kind of data we collect from these hunts. And then it also, commissioners looked at more traditional options, like you mentioned earlier, Bobby, with hunting with hounds. Talks about the ability to hunt near feeding stations, which are now very popular in the South. And those are all topics that get quite a bit of conversation. And so Florida has a long history of healthy black bear populations. We got to an area where we needed to work on recovery, beyond that recovery with very robust populations, and now talking about future hunts once again here. And as y'all know, it's just a topic that brings out a lot of discussion, rightfully so. People are passionate about hunting or not hunting. And, when we talk about bears, it's an iconic species to a lot of folks. And so it of course warrants a lot of discussion. So we appreciate y'all having us here to talk more about it.
Well, with 20 million people in Florida, I don't know how it breaks down, but is there a chance that a majority might somehow influence where you guys don't actually get the hunt that biologists say the state needs to help manage this population?
That's a really good question, and one of the toughest ones to answer. And to do that, I'll share a little bit about information that we've collected from the public here in Florida, but I usually set the tone for the conversation in managing game species across North America. Of course, Florida, like every other state and province in North America, we look to guidance from the North American model of wildlife conservation and managing our game species and public trust. And so, we think it's and know that it's very important to talk to everyone, every citizen of Florida, everybody who wants to be engaged in this topic. But we can't reach everybody and hear every voice. And so we reach out in different ways. And in Florida in 2016, following the 2015 hunt that we talked about earlier, we worked with hired an independent company to reach out to Floridians and do a robust, scientifically backed survey of Floridians to find out how they feel about hunting, how they feel particularly about bear hunting. And we purposely wanted to do that when the emotions were high after the 2015 hunt. We thought this was a good time to really gauge Floridians and their interest in black bear hunting. And so not surprisingly, we found out that the majority of Floridians in that study confirmed the majority of Floridians support hunting in general. The majority of Floridians, by a fairly narrow margin, barely over 50%, support hunting black bears. And then that margin, it shrinks. The number of people supporting black bear hunting grows when we ask if we're going to manage black bears in a way that in conjunction with science-based conservation. And there was some different wording they used in there. But so, we know that the majority of Floridians, through studies we see like this, support hunting if they know that it is an important part of wildlife conservation. You can ask that question in different ways and get different answers. There's another way that we reach out to the public, and we do this with all of our hunting rules here in Florida. We use a comment tool. And so this is not a scientifically backed survey, but instead we just broadly ask people to give us feedback on a hunt or on a particular item. And so when we ask for that, we see that a little over 70%, Morgan, correct me if my numbers are wrong, but a little over 70% of people who engaged in a commenting tool voiced the concern that they didn't want to see a black bear hunt in Florida. And there's various reasons that people communicate with us, whether they just would like to not see hunting of black bears, whether they feel that they'd like to see bear populations grow more. We get various feedback. And so it really depends on how we ask that question. But what's important for us decision making, we have the biological data, we have the biological science, and then we have the social science. And they're both incredibly important. And we want to use the biological science available to us to make our decisions on game management and incorporate social science to be successful in that endeavor. And so we want to use all of that data in the equation and try to get to a good landing spot. And I always bring back the North American model here because I think it's really important for us when we describe, especially a species like black bear that brings a lot of emotion, a lot of discussion. We look at managing public trust just like somebody would think about managing a trust fund and a bank account. And I think a lot of non-hunters in this conversation can think more about the financial aspect. If somebody sets up a trust fund, an amount of money, and it needs to be healthy, that needs to keep growing, that pot of money needs to keep growing, and it needs to be able to give fair disbursements to everybody in that family. Each member of the family might have a different opinion on how that trust fund, how that money should be used. And they have their fair share to be able to be allocated and used. So that trust manager needs to make sure the money's there, it's healthy, and it pays out into perpetuity. And we feel that's our job as trust managers. We need to make sure we have healthy game populations, healthy wildlife populations. They need to continue to be healthy. And for, even if it's a small percent, less than 2% of Floridians hunt, if less than 2% of those Floridians choose that allocation to be able to use for fair and ethical hunting, then we try our best to be able to provide those opportunities. And so that's where we land in the black bear discussion, is how can we manage black bears to be healthy and healthy into the future for the small percentage of folks who want to partake in consumptive management and have access to a hunting opportunity and healthy food for the table for the family. Then it's our goal to try to provide that while also meeting the goals of the non-hunting public as well.
Wow, that was a mouthful.
Yeah.
I told y'all the chief conversation officer, so y'all poke me if I start talking too much, and I'll quiet down.
So it reminds me of the very first, I can't believe we pulled it off in 93, 4. It's been so long ago. We launched out there not knowing a thing about what we're doing, the first Hunting the Country TV show. And our host, we brought in a host, actually had some acting experience. He did a great job at the time, Paul Newsom. But the very first show, he made the comment about, and I guess Cuz came up with the stat. He said, if you want to, and I'll say this, at the time, there was a lot more momentum behind, like, quote unquote, anti-hunting than there actually even is today. It was at a crescendo pretty much in the 90s. And he said if you love animals and you're an animal lover, and you want to donate money because of your deep love of animals, and you want to be sure the most percentage of your money goes to work for the animals, go to your favorite state and buy a hunting license. And I mean, I had never even heard that till then. I was so proud we put that out there, and it's true. So, I mean, and then the next thing he'd said was, and as a matter of fact, you know, endangered species and different things, never has been a game animal go extinct. Mm-hmm. You know, there's not to say something in nature couldn't cause, you know, some disease or whatever, but it was just a great point to make. It just didn't get told enough in broader media. The North American Wildlife Management Plan is like a miracle of the whole world we live in and how we do things. And, you know, the best thing we could possibly do with the population to this stage is monitor, manage, care for, selectively harvest to what's best. And you got to not only, you guys got such a tough job in your state biologists, is like you got to manage both what's best for the population of bear along with the safety and the interface with all the population too. So those things kind of, you know, are multiple reasons how you manage it. And that's not as easy as a state that's largely rural and you don't have all that interface to consider too. So, I mean, and the other thing I would say is that, you know, none of this is ever worth fighting about. I mean, people, you know, largely anti-hunting organizations have been preying on people's most tender emotions. Hey, I love animals. I will just about have a wreck to keep from hitting a squirrel in the road or something. I hate it. I love animals. I'm so tenderhearted. And so but then when you prey on people with misinformation, I mean, it's kind of sad. And the only way is science and care. And nobody cares more for these animals. Not just hunters, but even people like y'all that their life is about managing and take care of them. Yeah. And so, you know, are people going to have issues with hunting and blood sports? Sure. And, you know, if everybody is on the same page about caring for the earth, you know, we can respect that they feel that way because I love animals. Oh, my gosh. Mm-hmm. I'm so tenderhearted. But that doesn't mean you can't be a lifelong hunter and enjoy that too. Sure. And, you know, and we have to be able to do both. But when our management, which is y'all, and the science indicates, and then it's under the protection and management of our, you know, authorities, government, state, local, whatever, you just gotta turn loose and let them do their thing and respect it. I mean, it's hard. I realize it's hard in today's world. People are so brave because they can say they never have to look somebody in the eye to create a big stink.
Yeah.
You know.
And this day and age, you know, a lot more folks are thinking holistically, or, you know, trying to take a holistic or natural approach. I can't think of anything more natural than as far as a game species, than a black bear. Yeah. We use all the fat off of the bears. You're usually going to keep the whole hide. The meat is excellent. And so I really can't think of another game species where, you know, more of the actual animal is utilized than a black bear.
That's absolutely true. And one thing I think many Floridians don't realize is that bear meat's good, and that hunters really like and, you know, share their meat with family and friends.
Yeah, we've heard that. We've heard that a number of times. Yeah. So I was looking through some of these notes, and it's amazing to me that bears have expanded their occupied range from about 17% to 51% since 1992.
How about that?
That's an astounding number.
It is, and that 51% is occupied habitat, where bears are, you know, have established home range and are raising cubs. But there is no place in Florida, no city, whether it's West Palm Beach, close to Mar-a-Lago, or in the oldest city in North America, San Augustine, or downtown Orlando, that you might not have a bear. And we've had bears in all those places within the last few months. So bears can be found across the state, and in over half the state, it's occupied range. And that's a real conservation success story.
Yes,
it really is.
So you're talking about annual harvest of like 4%. basically. I mean, I can't imagine that the growth will just continue and you're going to end up having to go higher at some point. That's so nominal, and I'm sure you're going to make it strategic where it's pointed towards where you need it the most.
That's absolutely correct. The way that the hunt that's on the table now is crafted is it really gives that flexibility to adjust in the future. And so right now it's a very conservative number with we're estimating about 170 permits available. When we look at growth rates in our bear populations, that type of harvest number will allow continued growth. And so there may reach a point where in one of our subpopulations, we need to increase that number to help stabilize populations even more. Yeah. And so that can be a hard message to discuss too, because I think a lot of people throughout all of North America that are non-hunters, so people that maybe aren't even anti-hunting but just don't engage in hunting, think of hunting as just a tool in population management to reduce already overpopulated animals. And of course, when we look across North America, it's really not how we manage game species. We want to manage them over time, sometimes manage them in a way where they create a huntable surplus. Other times we want to make sure and manage them so they don't reach a level of overpopulation that can be counterintuitive to good wildlife management. And that's where we are here with black bears is, people ask us how many black bears need to be on the landscape to hunt. And we don't look at this top number of here's where we hit a spilling point. Instead, we look at a number of the minimum amount of bears that we need genetically in an area, and then we have a number of what we'd like to see, and we want to always stay above those. We do the same in managing alligators. It's a great species to think about that was, nearing extinction at one point by ending illegal markets and creating a hunting system. We brought that species back from the brink to where we have over 1 million alligators in Florida today. So we can use that hunting to grow populations. And then in the case of bears, though, we can use it to start slowly in helping manage growth of bear populations so that they don't exceed that habitat that Morgan talked about, the range in which we know is healthy, suitable habitat. With bears, we know that if they start to expand, we're not going to see necessarily the detrimental effects right away. They're going to spill over into those less suitable habitats that don't have the food and the resources. That's when we start to see unhealthy bears. So we think our goal as wildlife managers is to interject far before we reach that situation. So sometimes it's hard to communicate that in the non-hunting public of some of the why we hunt, right? Or some of the reasons or the mechanisms we use hunting as a tool for wildlife management, in North America. And with bears, we talked about the bear management, our policies surrounding bear management here in Florida. And when we set our guidelines, we had several tools to help adjust populations. Hunting's just one of those tools. But, hunting is the only one of those tools that brings in income. It brings in revenue to put back into black bear conservation. Makes it unique amongst the others. And it's the only tool that allows somebody to have ethical use of that animal to feed a family. And so,
absolutely,
it can be an easy conversation, but if it's not one that your average person engages in to understand every day.
No. Well, I do think as hunters, we do have to empathize though. If the conversation is, I think about a bear cub. I love animals. Of course, you know what? I love that you do, but that doesn't change the facts. So what are the options? So the bear, I use the analogy with deer usually, but because, nothing more precious than our white-tailed deer. Either it gets killed violently by nature or some dreaded disease it might have in nature, or it gets taken and harvested and killed by a human and around family enjoyment and using the meat instead of letting it rot somewhere. And in a lot of cases, whether you like it or not, it's up to you not to like it. But, it could be preserved forever, like Bobby's trophy on the wall over here for the family. And in a lot of cases, there's bad, like my buddy Tracy Bird said one time, there's bad eggs in every group. And there's bad eggs in hunting too, but largely the best people in the country. And, bringing families together, all those good things happen through hunting, through the process you manage. And the animal's going to die either way. Which one is better?
And that animal lives a fantastic life,
and so
in nature too.
Yeah, and so it just seems to me like if you step back from the emotion just a little bit, you can maintain your emotions and your love for something, and park it in a spot to still think clearly, and make a good science-based decision, because this puts it squarely under the radar of being cared for by the best of the best in history at conservation management, which is guys like you and others, around the country.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I hate that it gets into the emotional part and the arguments and the warring and the things like that. And I do understand that, but when you're on the side of what's right and true and caring for the earth, it just is what it is.
Hey, Morgan, let me ask this. Are you guys experiencing many human-bear conflicts around housing and where they're encroaching?
We have a very robust program of biologists and technicians that work every day helping manage bear conflicts, and we have really good communication programs about how to live with bears, bear-wise. So we do have a lot, and I will tell you this, while after we've hunted a number of years, we'll see some changes in bear behavior. Today, if you're in Florida, bears have no fear of humans at all.
Wow.
It's not uncommon to see them in daylight in some subdivisions, in some small towns, or out on some of our natural areas. And if you see one, they don't flee from you, typically.
Aren't they? Doesn't that make them more dangerous?
Well, one could argue that, certainly. So after hunting several years, I think bears will have a more natural respect and fear of humans like we see across much of the bears range. But regardless of whether we hunt or not, we're going to continue to have conflicts with bears. In all the states that have bear hunting, you still have bear conflicts. If you have open garbage, you will have problems with bears getting in it. So there are situations where if you create opportunities for bears to be mischievous, they will be. So regardless of where we hunt or not, we will continue to have really good programs that deal with nuisance bears and that educates the public about how to live responsibly with bears. So we've had some serious incidents with bears and people, and this hunting is not about solving that. It's about providing the management of a resource and providing opportunities for hunters to partake in that resource. So, we're going to continue to have, thousands of calls a year, and we're going to continue to have bears that sometimes have, that are causing problems, serious problems.
Yeah, the internet's full of videos of bears getting in people's trash cans and back porches and whatnot.
Yeah, I would like to think that, if you allow 170 bears to be taken in the first year, I would like to think that a lot of those bears that are going to be removed are going to be a little bit closer to the fringe. I don't see anybody trekking 10 miles into the backcountry of some national forest, which that sounds like a more fun hunt, but I would think the numbers would be better closer to that fringe, and that may help just kind of slowly alleviate some of that urban interaction.
It may. In our hunt in 2015, 78% of bears were taken on private land. And we have close to 6 million acres of public hunting lands here in the state.
Wow.
Good for you.
Broadest program in the Southeast,
Treasure.
as far as public areas to hunt. But,
Treasure.
Your assessment is right. A lot of these bears are, on private lands, and often that's because there's deer feeders on private land. So they're attracted to that. But again, while over the long term we might see some marginal improvements in terms of nuisance bears, if you look across the country, there's no scientific data that shows that hunting solves nuisance bear problems.
Okay.
But there is a lot of scientific data that about using hunting as a management
Oh,
tool.
Yeah.
I mean,
endless amount. So I've got a good question, just broader than just the bears, but in general, in wildlife management, what happens when a population, due to whatever politics or whatever reason, is left, can't be hunted and can't be managed and controlled, and they get so overpopulated that we have to go in the name of government depredation programs? What happens to those animals or carcasses or whatever? Because I'm just familiar with some of the farmers that have had to do it to deer, and they're not even allowed to go do anything with them. And those animals are just wasted in the name of protecting some kind of commerce or crop or something. So what happens normally if you have to step in outside of the management plan and do depredation?
Well, I'll use some real world examples here in Florida. We don't have too big of a problem. The type of crops here in Florida, bear depredation tags for bears are pretty limited. We do have agriculturally, bears having issues with apiaries and some things like that. But the example of, what happens without a management interaction like hunting or some other step to help work through those get us on track with a population goal.
Yeah.
When we look at our subpopulations, our largest subpopulation of bears in the central part of the state, if you think folks are familiar with the Ocala National Forest, the greater Ocala area, that's the part of the state we're talking about here. That's one of our bear populations that's the largest. It, though, has the smallest of annual growth rate right now. And when we look at that, it's because we have what we're talking about here, a population of bears that is filling up a good portion of that usable habitat. And so what do we see? We see bears that end up getting killed on the road. And I'll have Morgan correct me on statistics. I think in that we're somewhere around 200 vehicular incidents a year.
That's more than the whole state that you're going to allow to hunt right there.
So what happens to those bears? That's a good question.
So sad.
Bears, yeah, those aren't utilized as they would during a hunt. And so, those are some of the goals too, is to interject at a time when we can open up opportunity for harvest for the wise use, good conservation of a resource. What we see is, bears, we think of, unlike white-tailed deer, where we can, Morgan's the deer guy here, but we can go out and we can identify when there's a population issue. We can see browse line. We can see deer moving on to less suitable vegetation or food within that area. But with bears, we see that they start to move out to that less suitable habitat. So we're not going to see those signs that we see in deer management, but we do see signs like we see with roadkill. And that's something that we hope interjecting throughout time with appropriate conservation measures can help with as well. So that's kind of that real world example here in the state.
So when you asked about, we occasionally do have to take bears because they're a threat to public safety, or they're doing things like breaking into a home. They tend to like to get into back porches and sometimes into houses. And when we have those type of situations, we do have to take lethal action. And those bears are disposed of. Mm-hmm. We gain science from them and then we bury it. So the meat, the hide, all of those kind of things are not used. And it's a real shame to see a bear killed on the road. And it is a real shame to see us have to, put a bear down.
Yeah, I bet that is.
And I mean the whole hunting in North America is all about balance. You're just trying to, and there'll never be a perfect balance, but we're trying to attain as close as we can and maintain a balance. And then if you don't, and y'all know better than anybody, when you lose the balance, so many catastrophic things can happen, and if you work towards a balance, then look what's happened over centuries now, or a century at least.
Yeah.
And look at the stuff that's populated, because, we, as hunters, and then obviously, which is governed and managed, adjust what we get to do based on what's best for the species, not what's just most popular for us or something.
Yeah. But,
You know,
so, hey, Morgan, let me ask you this. Back when the last time y'all had a hunt, how did most of the guys, how did they hunt? And what would you expect that they would do this next time around?
Well, in 2015, hunting methods were pretty restricted. So hounds were not allowed, and you had to be more than 100 yards, and a bear had to be more than 100 yards from any kind of feed. So you could hunt on properties that had deer feeders, but you had to separate yourself and the bear by more than 100 yards. So most people were still hunting. They were in stands, and bears came by them. You know, we have a very naive bear population. Hunters had a good success because, bears are out during the daytime during hunting season, and they're moving. And so I think over time some of that will change. You know, I'm an avid deer hunter, and where I deer hunt, we have bears, and bears are. I hunt in Arkansas, where I grew up, and a lot of bears on the property I hunt, and I seldom ever see one. I think I've seen 3 bears in 30 years off the deer stand in an area that has an extremely high bear population. So things will change here, but so we're proposing to allow hounds, and we're proposing to allow people to hunt at deer feeding stations. And the reason we're proposing that is for hunters to be more selective. We'd like to see males taking. We would not like to see sows and cubs taken, particularly sows with cubs. So we do have specific rules that say don't do that, and the bear has to be over 100 pounds. But we're trying to prescribe not only for now but to the future. If you tree a bear, you can look at it and say, oh, that's the large male I want to take, or that's a sow, and we're going to call the dogs off. So that's kind of where we're moving towards, is not only for what we're proposing for the future is to allow hunters to have the ability to be selective in what they harvest. But I believe that, in this first year, that's why we're issuing 187 tags and being very, cautious in the amount of tags that we issue, in the format that we do it. Because I think hunters will be very successful, a lot more successful than what we see in other states, because these bears haven't been hunted for over a decade. And, I think that bears will be readily available for take.
Yeah, that makes sense. So will you explain to me real quick, I'm trying to make sure I understand this right, that when y'all did it in 15, there was a quota and you hit that quota really quick.
Yes.
And this time around, can everybody apply and get a permit? Will they have to check in and realize, we're
hit
the
talking
quota?
about a random draw for the 187 tags. And the tags will be allocated by subpopulation. So Northwest Florida, in the area in the eastern part of the Panhandle, will have a certain amount of tags. A certain amount of tags down in South Florida, down by the Big Cypress, north of that. Certain amount of tags for the Ocala National Forest, and a certain amount of tags for up around the Osceola National Forest, and private lands in those areas. So you will put in for a random draw. If you draw a tag, then a permit, there'll be one tag, you'll be able to harvest that single bear. We're talking about a 23-day season. That gives hunters the opportunity to sit in their stand and not have to shoot the first bear that came by. I think in 2015, people knew that the quota was going to fill quickly. So the first bear they saw, they shot, because they thought, if I don't, I won't have an opportunity to harvest a bear. So by providing a greater amount of time and greater flexibility in the hunting methods, we're going to give hunters the opportunity to be much more selective in harvest. And through time, as we see what hunter success rate is, what the sex ratio is in the harvest, and as bear populations continue to expand in the state, we likely will be able to issue more permits, more tags. So, but we want to do this adaptively, and our goal is to still see bear populations expand in many areas. That's why we're not hunting the entire state. We're hunting 4 areas that have really robust bear populations, and we're doing it very conservative. In fact, you couldn't be any more conservative than we are.
Sounds like a good plan.
It really
You know,
does.
I wrote the note down. I really fear for the state of Florida if they don't have the wisdom to let this go through and put this in y'all's hands. I mean, they're making a grave mistake. For honestly, not for hunters or anything, but for the bears.
Yeah.
That's just scientific fact.
So will you be able to choose the zone that you would like to apply for, or will you get put in for, you'll get to choose your zone? So if you live in Jacksonville, you'll get to pick, the East Panhandle or the North Zone or something like that.
That's correct. So when you put in for your application, you'll select which zone you're applying for.
Bobby wants to know if you guys.
Excuse me. Currently, our proposal is that you can apply as many times as you want. So it's $5 per application. If you wanted to apply 10 times, you could do that for one zone, or you could split it up among zones.
So are y'all thinking that you'll have 100% success, or are y'all building in some pad there for people like if Dudley drew a tag? I mean, there's probability he might not bring home a bear. Just being honest here.
Well, our plan in the number of tags we are issuing is that 100% success, and we're being so conservative. If all 187 were adult females and we had a 100% success rate, the populations would still expand. That's how conservative we're being. We don't believe that 100% of the hunters will be successful, and we don't believe that folks will harvest. All of the harvest will be females. But we wanted to start out very conservatively. We can be adaptive as we see what hunter success is, and we see what the harvest is made up of. And then as we're able to or need to, we can expand the number of permits available in future years.
So can non-residents apply for these tags?
Well, yes. We're limiting the number of tags issued in our current proposal. It's limited to 10% of the tags going to non-residents. We look back to 2015, we had a very small percentage of non-residents purchase bear permits here in Florida, even though anyone that wanted to could purchase one. So we, gut feeling is that we won't hit that 10% margin. Maybe in future years we might. We've got some really big, nice, large bears here in Florida, but I don't think folks across the country realize that. So if you wanted to kill a Boone and Crockett bear, this is one of the places where you might come.
Morgan,
I think when people picture black bear hunting, they picture mountains and snow-capped mountains and areas in the country that are different from the Palmetto Flatwoods of Florida.
So one of the things I'll add, here from Morgan is, we talked earlier about the biological data and biological science to social science. This is where we try to match it up again. We're using that best available scientific data we have to make good recommendations. And then we're creating some cushion because we hear from a lot of people that they're concerned still. Even when they see the data, they're still concerned. They really want to take a slow step, or even if they don't want us to go down this path at all, it helps to be able to see that data aligns with continuing to allow slow growth in these populations, manageable growth. And also, this hunt identifies not only those bear management units, those areas we talked about, but we also created something new called bear hunt zones. And that allows us to create new boundaries within the units where we can either shrink or expand the hunting opportunity to protect corridors. So we know our subpopulations, we still want some movement between those. We still have areas where bears can successfully expand. So we've added in tools to allow us to manage that hunting opportunity in ways that can allow for growth where it's important to the community, and it can allow for connectivity so we can see expansion where it's still important for black bears. So, that is one of those ways that we're hopefully able to bring even folks who really would not like to see a bear hunted. Hopefully they can see in this data presented that it still reaches those goals. Like you said in the beginning, we all have a shared goal of healthy bear populations in Florida. And so that's where we work with those two different sets of data to try to get to a good landing point.
Sure. Dudley.
That just makes too much sense.
Yeah. So, guys, do y'all have any headwinds or any things y'all are concerned about that, or I'm just wondering, how can you verify one of these 180 people actually is a hunter and is going to use that tag?
Well, non-hunters and even people who are opposed to bear hunting will be able to have the opportunity to apply for those permits. And certainly it's likely that some of them will go to folks that are just getting that permit so that someone can't harvest a bear. But, after this first season, we'll see what the hunter success rate is. If the hunter success rate is low, we will know that we need to issue more, that we can issue more permits. So it is a concern for us, but we know that we can correct for that, certainly in future years.
Sure,
Now,
and that they'll be buying a ticket and able to help the bears.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen from other types of permit hunts that we have and stuff, there's often a fear that opportunity will be taken by non-hunters. And while that fear is always there, we have not seen it realized. So I don't think that I think that the majority, my opinion, I'm putting my finger up in the air and the wind's blowing out of the south today. I believe, based on that the majority of the permits will be obtained by hunters and they will be successful. But if we see that isn't true, we certainly have the opportunity in 2026 and years going forward to adjust for the percentage of permits going to non-hunters.
I would think you could make it to where they have to have already at least bought a license. So you get the money out of them at least for a license,
or taking a hunter safety course and learn more about the positives of hunting.
Well, we do have things built into the structure of this, is that they do have to put money in the game in order to apply for a permit, and then the permit is $100. So it would cost somebody at least $5 to apply and $100 per permit. Well, how many non-hunters are that serious? If they don't purchase the permit, it goes into the next person on the list that was drawn. So we're hopeful that we won't have a lot of gaming of the system. We could require them to buy a hunting license, but if they're willing to pay $100 for a permit, they're willing to go for the price of a hunting license.
Sure.
As well. And then we've also seen, I know this is kind of getting in the weeds, but we have people often that purchase licenses and stuff, and then they do a chargeback to their credit card company. So if we required them to have a hunting license, they could buy one, and then when they didn't get drawn, they could charge back. That ends up costing us money, believe it or not, so in fees. So it's we realize there could be some gamemanship. We've tried to build in a system that tries to prevent that in much a way as possible. Certainly in future years, if we see that half of the tags went to non-hunters, then we're just going to double the amount of tags that we put in the draw. And they will be helping fund, non-hunters would just be helping fund bear conservation, and we'll still be killing the number of bears we feel we need to for management.
They thought this out.
Absolutely. Is this a public balloted vote at this point now that it's passed the FWC?
It's not. Here in Florida, there's different management types in different states. Here, when I talked about earlier, all those agencies coming together in 1999, that was through a constitutional amendment voted on by the people of Florida. And it was overwhelming positive vote to create the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And so the FWC, 7 commissioners that sit on that commission and make these decisions, they enact these rules through their vote. They're appointed by the governor to 5-year terms. And so that's the system here. And so it was voted on by those commissioners at a previous meeting, and they'll make that final vote, which would go into rule.
So we just got to lobby those
guys. As I
guys.
mentioned before, the
And
public
girls.
input is vitally important, and we do everything we can. We hold public meetings, webinars, have comment tools, very open meetings. We had 170 speakers, I believe, on this item at our last meeting. It might have been a record for us. We'll likely have a lot of speakers again, and we're going to make time to hear every single person because every single voice matters. And we've got a group of commissioners that really, really want to hear from people. It's important to them, no matter what their aspect, what their goals are here. And so we're very open to the public, but the vote is done amongst those commissioners.
Is this are the commissioners majority hunters and anglers, or some of them not?
Yeah, that ebbs and flows throughout time. I would say that the current group of commissioners we have all participate in hunting and fishing to varying degrees, and you typically have seen that historically on our commission, but at times we have folks that don't hunt or fish as well. But this current group, all in one way, shape, or form, some more than others, do participate in a lot, just a broad, not just hunting and fishing, but a lot of outdoor experiences in Florida.
George Morgan, guys, is there anything that we hadn't discussed that we need to make sure you guys point out?
Well, I would tell you this, black bears are broadly distributed across, much of North America. Black bear populations are expanding across the U.S. and in North America. About 80% of the country of the bear range has hunting, and bears are continuing to thrive in all of those areas. Florida has the largest bear population in the U.S. that isn't hunted, and there are 7 states that have fewer bears than us that successfully hunt bears every year on a sustainable basis. So we feel like that we're right in the mainstream in proposing a hunt. We feel like we have more than enough bears to have a manageable, sustainable hunt every year and provide opportunities for hunters. And we're looking forward to the future with a continuing expanded bear population, whether we hunt bears or not.
What time of the year would this hunt occur? Would it be a fall hunt?
Well, that's a really good question. Our proposal is that bear seasons would be during some period from October 1 to December 31st. For this coming year, our proposal is the first Saturday in December to the last Sunday in December. So a 23-day season. The later you hunt in the year, the fewer females that you will harvest because they go to den earlier. Sows that are going to have cubs and sows with cubs tend to den in the very first part of December, whereas males tend to den the latter part of December or January. And so we're trying to schedule a season to encourage a greater harvest of males and fewer females. If you had a population that you felt was exceeding the habitat's carrying capacity, or for other reasons you felt you need to lower that population, you would be more likely to harvest bears in October because you would likely take more females in October. So we are creating the flexibility in the framework where we can schedule a season, the length of it and the timing of it, so that we can achieve our biological harvest goals. So starting out in a very conservative manner, we're proposing to hunt in December. And so, in many places in the country, if you had a December hunt, bears are already denned, you wouldn't be harvesting any bears. But here, it's a good time to harvest a male bear, and it's a good time to kind of protect females and cubs.
I'll add too, those dates. What's another thing that's really important, especially if we have non-hunting listeners, that we heard in the 2015 hunt that folks felt like some lactating females were harvested. And of course, the rules prohibit the take or the harvest of cubs, but people felt concerned that there was an opportunity to harvest cubs. But we heard a big concern about if there was a lactating female, then doesn't that mean that there's an orphan cub that doesn't have a chance of survival? And that's an important part of a discussion for a non-hunter or anybody that's concerned about hunting bears. And so this season timing is really important because here in Florida, when we're looking at the survival success of cubs, we look at that after August 1st or over 30 pounds is a cub that can survive on its own without its mother. And not only can it survive, but after that time, after August 1st, or after they're 30 pounds or greater, all the studies we've done on this show that they have equal survival success, whether they're with their mother or not. So this timing is really important. Although, as Morgan said earlier, we have some things set here to help reduce in the beginning a female harvest. We're looking in our early hunts to have a male skewed harvest. Females that may be harvested at that time of year do not have dependent cubs. And it's really important for people who ask that question and wonder, what about the health of bears that are still in the landscape? So timing is essential here.
So if you're a hunter, an October season is preferable because there's more bears and they're more on the move. So, but being conservative, that's why we're skewing to December, is, there'll be fewer bears up and moving, and they won't, in October, they're really trying to lay on fat. So they're hitting acorns and palmetto and whatnot, and they're really on the move, and they would be coming to feeding stations. They're in that phase of their biology where they're storing fat for the winter. And yes, bears do hibernate here in Florida. That's another misconception. Yeah, it's warm here, but they do den up. But we're purposely having that season set in December in order to try to be ultra conservative in our harvest.
That makes sense. You guys have really done your homework.
Yes.
Just to make this where it's going to work for everybody's best interest.
I'm just real impressed. You nailed it, Dudley. They have. This is how you would want an agency to behave, and prepare to make their case. And it looks to me like they've made a great case for let's bring back the bear season.
It's not even a question.
Greatly appreciate that. We've got it. Morgan and I are sitting here today, but the real talent and is our folks that are on the ground in the field. Not only on the on the ground management side, but we talked about that agency structure, and we're lucky to have a research side of the agency as well. And so our researchers are on the ground biologists, our rule specialists that came together to put together this comprehensive rule package. You're right; they're impressive. They continue to impress me every day.
God bless them.
Well, look, let's do this. I should have done this at the beginning. It's my fault. We need to learn a little bit about you so that y'all don't look like suits. There.
We got to compensate for this.
We're going to live down wearing this tie.
Yeah. So I'm going to let Dudley does something called rapid fire. He asks you some real quick questions, both of y'all. He'll tell you how to answer them, but we get to learn a little bit about you guys, and it's brought to you by our friends at Nutrient Ag, who I know they'd be big supporters of this as well. There's a lot of hunters in that group.
Yes.
All right, Dud.
All right, guys. Let's see. We'll let Morgan answer it first, and George, you can answer second. But we're just going to ask the round of questions one time. So both of you guys answer. We're just going to try to make this quick and fun. Lots of food questions in here because when I think Florida, I think food. So are you ready?
Ready.
Absolutely.
All right. Are you a sushi fan, or I'll just stick with the fried rice?
Sushi.
I like sushi.
All right. Have you ever been scuba diving?
No.
Yes, long history with my family in scuba diving here in Florida.
Have you ever been skydiving?
No.
Absolutely not, never will.
Soft shell crab, yes or no?
Yes.
No.
Name a favorite seasoning blend, like your favorite go-to seasoning.
slap your mama.
We're in Florida. It's Everglades seasoning.
Yeah.
There you go.
What is your favorite tree species?
Bur oak.
Mine might be live oak.
Okay.
They have whoa, time out. They got bur oaks in Florida.
Well, he goes to Arkansas a
Okay,
lot.
I got you. Okay.
Okay.
First thing I did when I bought my house was plant one out there, and it was about 6 inches high, and now it's about 30 feet high.
Wow, that's
Every
awesome.
house I've ever had, I planted a bur oak in the front yard.
I'll be calling you for acorns this
Okay, yes,
fall.
big time.
All right. Have you ever eaten Florida Tupelo honey?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Name 2 favorite foods a Florida bear would love to eat from a grocery store dumpster.
I don't think they're that discriminating. It's all the above, but certainly I've actually had to go with dark bears that were eating the leftover bakery goods, and that's probably the number one thing that they would love in a dumpster: donuts and bear claw.
All right. That's good enough for both of y'all. All right. So Miami Marlins or Tampa Bay Rays?
Tampa Bay.
Marlins.
All right. And last but not least, Florida State, or U of M?
I'm gonna go with Florida.
That was a tough one for the Arkansas guy. It's Florida State.
Okay. Love it. All right.
Oh, wow. That's a good
I do feel like I know y'all better now.
All right. Well, you're not off the hook just yet. So we devised a trivia question that's just for you guys. Now, I think these will be slam dunks for y'all, but it's a chance to educate our audience just a little bit about bears. So I'm turning it over to Richie.
All right.
Is this brought to us by the Peanut Patch?
Yes, our friends. I'm sure you guys love boiled peanuts. Who doesn't love a good? So the Peanut Patch, any of the gas stations down there around y'all can check out the Peanut Patch products. They're delicious.
So today's listener who wins a prize here is West Tennessee Hog Hunter, and his prize is some Bones footwear,
Oh, yeah.
Bottomland camp house shoe.
Toxie, I saw you wearing
Oh,
some.
they're so comfortable.
I mean, comfy on the top and four-wheel drive on the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah. Go to Bones, BONZZZ.com. You can check them out.
Yep. All right. So here's the question. Unfortunately, bears have been poached for gallbladders throughout history. What were they used for?
They're used for folk medicine in China.
That's exactly right.
Folk medicine is the nice.
That took him a long time, maybe a quarter second.
You know, I think still to today up in the Appalachian part of the world, they are, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't they still poached?
Well, I think Takya said it best, that there's some bad apples in every barrel, and so poaching a wildlife, and particularly illegal trade of wildlife going overseas, is a problem. I don't know if you guys had heard of it. We made a case a couple of years ago that we caught a fellow with 600 flying squirrels that they were sending over to China. So poaching and illegal trade in wildlife products is a very serious problem. I don't think we have poaching of bears here in Florida that is a population issue. We're seeing populations growing 10% or more a year.
Wow.
We've got a great law enforcement division here, not only uniformed patrol officers, but we've got investigative divisions and undercover divisions. And that's what it takes for some of these cases like gallbladders and illegal trade in wildlife is a serious investment in long-term investigation, sometimes undercover. And I'm proud of the folks that I work with here that do that. And they do a great job in preventing that from being a super serious problem here in Florida.
Yeah, that's great. Rich, you should hit the horns on that one. Those guys that's important work right there.
It is.
Very.
Well, look, you guys have done a great job explaining the scenario. Sounds like your team has done an exemplary job in preparing for this. We wish
100%.
y'all nothing but stay in touch with us. Man, Dudley, we ought to put in for a tag.
We ought to.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah, we should.
So, hey, I got to say that, you know, people out there listening, I'm sure the large majority of them are like, you know, pro hunting, whatever you want to call it. That side is, but there's not a side in this. I mean, they are not on a side. They're not on the hunting or anti-hunting side. They're on the side of the bears.
Right.
And so that should unite everybody to a good decision and not have to fight over this. They are doing what's the best interest of our wildlife. And the people in Florida honestly should thank their lucky stars that people like them and their governor on down are in charge of their wildlife and resources there, instead of, sitting around every day trying to figure out what to complain about, because it is the most, I say it all the time, Mississippi, Florida too. What is really us is not like our factories and all this stuff. That's a place for people to work, and that's great. But what is the people and the land and the critters? That is really what's Florida, and really what is Mississippi. And celebrate the people that are taking care of it. Do we need advice? Do we need help? Do we need to seek opinions from everybody? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we should be grateful. And I hope more and more people will get that way.
Good words. George, that tie looks awfully tight around your neck. I don't know.
It's got to come off soon. Yeah, I'm never going to live this one down with y'all, so I'll be careful what I wear next time.
Oh, we'll never tell anybody.
I hope we do more with George. We are hoping to do a little bit of a show around the Florida Panther, and George has been very helpful in trying to introduce us to the right folks. That's a great conservation story down there, Tom.
It is
What they've done.
Bobby so bad wants there to be panther populations in Mississippi and Alabama and all these places, and we get to that point with the right authorities. So tell me there actually are long-tailed cats, and they'll go, no, there's not an actual incident of one. And he's just so deflated. So he'd be so excited to be able to talk about a panther finally.
We're excited to talk about panthers too. They're special, so it'd be a great episode.
There's all kinds of cool stuff in Florida.
It is.
They got the cool turtles and
like I said, diversity king of all our 50 states.
yeah.
Osceolas.
Don't even talk about that. That's like, man.
We appreciate y'all and would love the opportunity to showcase a lot of the unique wildlife here, a lot of the unique wildlife challenges, and all the great opportunities that the state has too. Some people know about them and others don't. So there's
a great
lot
idea.
of great things to talk about.
Yes.
Yep. Well, Morgan Richardson and George Warthen, you guys are class acts. We've enjoyed talking to you. And
thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Again.
Yep.
Thank you for having us on today.
Absolutely. We enjoyed it. So why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley. Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.